watering hole. They closed down. I said, where we supposed to go? We'd pack that place down to the ceiling in the floor, and that glass shattered front door in small town Ontario. There's holes in the walls now, no doors on the stalls. It's just another hole in the wall in small town Ontario.
For many years, a tavern of some description has sat upon the site now occupied by the Queen's Hotel. The original having been built sometime in the late 40s. Like most houses of entertainment in frontier towns, it led a varying life and ran the gamut from good to bad and bad to good, depending on the capacity or incapacity of its hosts.
The Queen's was one of the first and one of the best, and helped build Owen Sound's reputation as a decent place to come and stay and do your business and move through and so on. Owen Sound was known later, toward the end of the 19th century, as Corkscrew City. It was said that there were 99 saloon doors, and since there are 2 doors typically on every saloon, one wonders about the one with the one door.
It was not uncommon for visitors to refer jokingly to Owen Sound as the Corkscrew Town, and to allege that every adult male in the community carried a corkscrew, just in case something portable turned up. Nearly all local hotels, and there were 13 of them, disregarded sales regulations in effect under the Liquor Licensing Act, and more or less freely sold liquor during prohibited hours, on Sundays, and to intoxicated and indigent persons.
It was a rough town because by then we had more and more industrialization, lots of factory workers, lots of farmers bringing their big tree trunks and in to be milled, bringing their grain, their fleeces and so on in to be milled, and having a social day in the town. And more the sailors on the boats as they were carrying all of this merchandise. By the mid-1870s, we had the beginning of, and later that decade, the arrival of the Toronto Graham Bruce Railway. That building across the corner was the CPR cigar factory, and this is where, in Owen Sound, the custom cigars for CPR steamships and railways were manufactured here. Owen Sound became a major hub for the CPR. They built in Scotland the steamships for the Upper Lakes in sections, brought them in here, floated them in, assembled them, and began the great era of the CPR steamships. Well, that meant thousands of people through Owen Sound on the rails onto the steamships, and they needed hotels because the ships and the rails didn't sink 100%.
By 1905, public opinion demanded actions to correct the evils inherent in the open and uncontrollable sale of alcoholic beverages. At a public meeting, October 15, 1905, it was decided to circulate a petition requesting the town council submit the local option question to the vote of the citizens. Reverend McAlpine, in early summer, spoke seriously to the young men of town. There is altogether too much drinking in Owen Sound, a barroom at almost every second corner. One half of our hotels are little more than sinkholes of hell. One half are saloon first and hotel only secondly. Especially some so-called respectable women are the most deadly danger to our young men in the town. The campaign was hard fought and public feeling ran high. The advocates of the local option held a number of meetings in the town hall and in churches. The hotel operators and their supporters fought back vigorously as the campaign continued Both sides were well organized. Every qualified voter was pressed to exercise his franchise.
Mrs. R.J. Doyle led the creation of the Women's Christian Temperance Union movement in Canada, here in Owen Sound. The contest between those who were in favor of having free and open liquor service and those who were strict prohibitionists and thought this was the work of the devil and was truly a major social problem because of abuses of liquor. And this argument of wet or dry is so woven into the history of Owen Sound. It goes right back to the very beginning.
Owen Sound is known for the excellence of her hostilities, a leader being the Queen's Hotel, known as the best $1.25 a day house in Canada.
The Queen's remained a major hotel in the history of the hotel and accommodation industry in Owen Sound for many years. It changed hands a number of times, and it was a wet hotel, and then it was owned by the Temperance Hotel Company and was a dry hotel, and then it was a wet hotel again, and so on. The Queen's Hotel truly embodied that story.
Moved to Owen Sound, I think there was a feeling that in some ways the past had betrayed the community, that the great days of Owen Sound were behind it. And there were lots of industrial buildings that were part of a kind of 19th century industry, early 20th century industry, that had essentially petered out. And a lot of them were just industries that don't have a kind of 21st century future. Some of it had to do, I think, with sort of mismanagement of the fortunes that were generated by those industries. But when I first came to Owen Sound, there were lots of these industrial buildings, quite beautiful and great opportunities for redevelopment, but they just got all torn down.
I used to live right across the street there when I was about 8, 10 years old, and I've lived up the street. I've gone by here for about the last 50 years or so. Well, back when I was 8, 10 or so, it was like an old, 100-year-old hotel, looked like an old Western inside there, like the old bar or the old counter and whatnot there. And then progressed to, it was bought out, I guess, sometime in the 70s there, and that was Owen Sound's first strip joint. Well, actually, both bars here were kind of, well, a little on the rough side, I'd say. It wasn't like there's, fight every 2 minutes or something there. There'd be everybody probably, back in those days, you were, probably half drunk. They probably shouldn't have served about 90% of the people that were in the place.
The Queen's did become a bar, and it was a place where a lot of people could go, including younger people, to have fun, to play pool, to meet other people.
To tell you the truth, it was just a typical dark bar area. And when I went in there, I think they did a little renovation in the inside, and there was a very long bar, I can remember. And the smell, it was very distinctive, of the beer.
I can remember happy hour at the Harb, and it was 25 cents a draft.
And what was on draft? Do you remember that?
You didn't ask back then, it was just on draft.
The main reason here is to stand by and make sure the peace is kept. The problem is we've got a large number of people exiting the two hotels that are located directly across from each other in a residential zone. Subsequently, you're getting noise, and there is a noise bylaw, and we're here for the purpose of enforcing the noise bylaw too.
It was run appropriately. I think the problem was actually in that area, which is a residential zone, you had two bars. And they get humming around 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. Subsequently, the noise would increase.
I don't think the appearance on the outside made it a place where people would go in there usually, and having a business on 8th Street for numerous years, I worried half to death when the bars got out at night, because that's when things would happen.
Oh, it wasn't too bad of a place as far as go. Yeah, they did have a fairly reasonable restaurant there one time. But other than that, I think most of it was derelict for most of my years.
This whole area was like 8th Street was all like all the little apartments along the street and whatever. There was just little old ladies, quiet as whatever.
In my humble opinion, I could compare it to a nursing home nowadays. A lot of the elderly people in Owen Sound did reside at the Queen's Hotel.
Back in the 70s, and especially in the 80s, the Owen Sound North Stars, the senior lacrosse team, of course, they were the team in Grey Bruce in the area. And it always seemed to be the Queens was one of the mainstays after practice over, the game's over, and then of course the players and their wives would head. Queens was always one of the many ones we go. And they were still renting rooms, to my knowledge, back in those days, upstairs. We did, a couple of times we got rooms for the North Stars who were trying out for the weekend. We put them in at the Queens. Most of the hotels, on the Selden Hotel, was one time was a real spot. The meals in there were fabulous and whatever. And a lot of them just went to some low-end bars and whatever else, and it was demise of them.
The Downtowner Motor Hotel, owned by Grey Bruce MPP Eddie Sargent, is in receivership. It's stressed that the hotel remains open as usual. A Kitchener accountant firm has taken over the financial operation of the Downtowner. Mr. Sargent said the Downtowner Hotel could not cope with interest rates of 23 and 25%. The Downtowner goes into receivership after another downtown Owen Sound hotel, the Selden House, came to the same fate.
The turbulent recent history of the Downtowner included several back-to-back bankruptcies, the latest last July. But since then, an unidentified holding company has purchased the building and now intend to restore it to some of its past grandeur. Owners hope to get a heritage designation on the building, which might loosen provincial purse strings to help with the project. And when everything is done, the Downtowner will be no more. The hotel will go back to its original name, the Patterson House.
Mr. Sargent bought the hotel, the former Patterson House, in the mid-60s. Shortly after that, Owen Sound, the last remaining dry city in Ontario at that time, went wet. A saloon was added, and at the rear of the building, a two-story motor hotel, lounge, and dining room was built.
Yes, I have some memories of the Queen's Hotel. Just off the top of my head, back in the 1972, when I first started the job with the Owen Sound Police Services, back then it was the Owen Sound Police Force. Part of our duties was to do foot patrol, and every night faithfully we checked doors and we walked 7.5 miles every night. And the Queen's Hotel was on our beat, and I remember one night I was coming up 8th Street checking doors, and in a doorway there was a little kitten, and the little kitten had been injured. In fact, a serious eye injury to the little kitten. It was a cold night, and I don't think the kitten was going to last too much longer. I picked the kitten up and I put the kitten in my pea jacket pocket, and I walked to the Queen's Hotel. The reason I did that is because at that time, the Queen's Hotel housed a lot of elderly people. And there was a gentleman that lived there by the name of Mr. Bowerman. And Mr. Bowerman did have a passion for cats. And I walked into the back door. At that time, the back door was left open partially to allow Mr. Bowerman's cats to come in and out as they wished. And the door was ajar, and I went to the back door, and I went to his room, and I knocked on his door, which was answered by him. This is probably 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I presented him with this little kitten that had been injured, and he took it in, And I know for a fact that he did take it to the vet, and he had the privilege to adopt that cat, and it was with him for, I think, over 12 years.
Certainly at one point it was a grand old building. But certainly at one point it was a grand new building when it was built. It was really a remarkable building for its time. Unfortunately, it was neglected for too many years. So if you have a grand old building, obviously, no matter how well built it is, if you don't repair the roof and you do structural changes that affect its integrity, then it doesn't matter. And unfortunately, the beautiful building was crumbling.
Greystone Office Center had some professional offices in it when we have developed it, but a lot more professional people have arrived in the building. Doctors, we have optometrists, we have lawyers, accountants, we have a pharmacy that serves all of those professional people. It's not just an office center, it is a place where clients and patients come and go all day long. So you have need for parking for staff as well as for parking for clients. We do own a couple of properties down 3rd Avenue East here as well, and we did investigate expanding parking behind our current parking area into those areas, which are rather long backyards. We did some investigations on that, discovered that did not fit within the desires of the neighborhood. There was desire that that remain green and that remain part of private property. So that wasn't something that we wanted to pursue. Just didn't seem to fit with the environment the neighborhood was desiring. So then our minds turned to the closest available property that was already commercial, which was the Queen site.
When it appeared that it was going to become a parking lot, I thought I better get over there and have a look myself, because obviously this was going to be controversial. And I could not believe the condition of that building inside. It was scary. And the one thing that struck me was, thank God we didn't lose a whole bunch of particularly young people who were in that bar. That was one of the 2 bars that the young people in the community frequent, and it was...
I don't want to interrupt you, but
yeah.
What do you mean by think I didn't lose them?
That there wasn't some sort of collapse of the building, quite frankly. It wasn't... The damage inside was really bad, and the outside of the building was being held up by this steel post, and that was a bit concerning too.
The second floor, as you said, was in very poor condition, some stairs taken out completely. It had been converted, if you could say in a loose term, to use for a public hall, but the terms of its conversion were just very suspect. It wasn't anything that you could add to. It would have to have been all completely gutted and redone.
They hinted that perhaps the building wasn't sound, but the only engineering study that we had said that it was fine. It would need to be gutted inside, but lots of heritage buildings are gutted inside.
And it had been a bar for so long.
Yeah. I mean, it had been allowed to deteriorate, but I'm not sure what that had to do with anything, because it was not about to fall down on anybody.
It's with the old foundation around here. This is just a sand, it was a swamp. So you got the shale foundation, the walls and everything was floating and whatnot. So you could see where she'd sunk a bit here and there type thing. So it was getting bad shape, so it was time for it to come down.
It was the single worst decision that council's made in the 13 years that I've been on council.
I think it was strained. I think it was clearly strained. It was a very contentious issue, and there were very, very strong feelings around it.
quite frankly, it was a decision that I felt very comfortable making. I'd done my research. The grand old lady had really died 20 years ago or more.
Is your council meeting on tonight?
The stupid thing was the decision would have begun a process that still could have led to the demolition of that building.
Yeah, I'd been hearing for a while that it was coming down. I think it was almost 2 years that it had been in the works. And Kim's mom called me up on holidays and said, "Did you see the article in the paper?" And I said, "No." And she says, "Well, the Queen's is coming down."
There's absolutely no question that the building could have been saved. It's disappointing that we couldn't find a formula under which it could have been saved. And we had meetings with the owner, we had meetings with potential buyers, and there was a real effort on behalf of staff, directed by council and some councillors being involved, in terms of trying to find common ground between the owners and any potential purchaser who might renovate the building. Ultimately, those negotiations broke down, and council decided not to extend the pain, so to speak.
No, nothing was done to save that building, in my view. Absolutely nothing. 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 You know, the city staff did an amazing job throughout this. They had a tightrope to walk. The mayor cast the deciding vote. When that sort of situation happens for senior staff, that's very, very tricky for them.
You know, his role became a kind of point of some controversy, and it wasn't clear exactly what position Curtis was taking as an individual. He, of course, has to be a facilitator for council and for the will of council, but you know, I think most of us have always thought that Craig was a powerful influence on council, but it hasn't really been clear, from the public record anyway, just what role he might have had in the fate of that building.
Politically, nothing happened. Politically, I'll tell you, politically it was extremely difficult because council had made the decision with the mayor's vote to allow the building to be demolished, period. Now, council's made that decision. Now, I completely disagreed with that decision, and so did 3 others of us. So 4 of us on that council completely disagreed with that decision of council. I took it upon myself to meet with the owners of the building, to dialogue with a potential developer, and all I was trying to do was to bring them to the table, to get them to sit down across the table from each other, because I, to this day, and there are 4 of us who will agree, that building could have been renovated. It could have been renovated into apartments. The exterior of the building would have been maintained. The interior absolutely would have been gutted. We would have had assessment coming from that building. We lost over $400,000 worth of assessment. The minute that building came down, every residential taxpayer in Owen Sound got about a 1% tax increase, and nobody seemed to catch that.
Well, they rejected it on the issue of the rights of the private property owner, and the mayor, she did. It was a split vote, and she decided, and her issue was private. The owner of property has some rights, and I can't interfere with that.
So it's a property rights issue for you?
It is a property rights issue, and if there is, we do have means of dealing with properties that are dangerous because they haven't been maintained, and we'll do that. But if people are maintaining their properties, I think it would be better to be able to reward them, and that's something that we should be contemplating as a council, instead of seeming to be punitive.
A majority of council now believes and is prepared to argue that, prepared to stand behind the idea that the community itself has an interest here, and they seem to be ready to assert it.
Usually what I like to do on a tight turnaround is pay as I go, because you don't know how much material you're going to get out. And I couldn't round up a crew in time. I tried to get in about 7 o'clock and work till, 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, and then came home and unloaded. And the other thing was to get transportation to move the materials. So Kim's dad had a small trailer. Well, we filled that trailer every day. There was about 40 hoods, but some of them were 3 stories up. So I was figuring, probably a 3-man crew. You were looking at probably, to take them down properly, you'd need about 2 or 3 days. And the weight of them. Like, I don't know if a lot of people knew they were actually cast iron. After I'd done the quote and I agreed to pay the gentleman the money, I found out that the museum was going in, which was fine, but I'd already agreed on the material and what I was paying for it, and I was nervous that the museum would probably take the sign in the main entranceway.
We got a phone call about 2 days before it was actually supposed to be torn down. And at that time, the manager, Brian Manser, and a couple of our Heritage Committee members went down to look at what was available and sort of see what we could take and salvage at that time. So when they went to look, they decided on the brick. We got the one staircase and banister. And at the time, we also wanted the window casings. Unfortunately for us, there really wasn't enough time for us to get the proper equipment in there to be able to remove those safely, so we had to let those go. But we did also manage to get a huge cast heater from upstairs as well, which is quite lovely. And that was just sort of we showed up and he said, if you want it, take it. And so they grabbed it. So that's how we ended up with that as well.
You can understand when I say it's a lot easier going down this way than it was before.
The fire escape, in fact, comes from the old Queen's Hotel in Owen Sound. I have made several arrests on the fire escapes at the Queen's Hotel. It was a hacksaw and about 2 days of hand bombing the fire escape, and then we brought it home in a trailer and we painted it. And then my oldest son's hockey team showed up, and 10 on each side, and we placed it where it is sitting now.
I tear a lot of buildings down. We've been doing it for a long, long time, and I haven't run across them before. And I think the nice part, when you look at some of the manufacturing in the industry that took place in Owen Sound, a lot of the material was made locally. Yeah, they're very unique.
Well, the door wouldn't fit out that entranceway. So the door actually had to be brought down in and turned on its side to get it out of the hole. If you could own the front entrance from the Queen's Hotel that's been standing there for 130 years, if I was building a house, that'd be the entranceway I'd be put in it. So the first things I did was the sign. Now the sign was up at least 2.5 stories or whatever.
I was driving past Queen's Hotel and the Brothers sign had been taken down, and I was surprised. All of a sudden there was this lovely little veranda and a gorgeous sign in place of this Brothers sign, and it struck me as being something worth documenting. I was in the middle of another set of paintings that I was thinking about called Home Free, and different places people call home, and that some of them aren't as standard. And I started thinking about hotels as being places people used to stay in for longer periods of time and call home. And I had a young model coming up to the studio here, so she posed for me and I put her on the balcony. And I took some pictures and I did some sketching while it was still there. And I was in the middle of that painting, and I realized that my perspectives were off because she was standing right in front of me, but I had taken the pictures of the hotel and done the sketching of the hotel from down below. So I went back to see if I could go up to the second floor across the street and get something in the proper perspective, and it was down.
My business partner called me and she said, you better get into town. I just heard they're going to tear it down in 3 days. So I was coming in anyway, but I packed my camera and I just parked on the other side of the road and started shooting and got a few shots and then put them together and started painting them. I thought there was an urgency to do this. You could almost see it just be demolished, and it was in a day. I don't think it was run down. It was perfect. The structure was straight, just as my ruler could draw a line, you know? Not to say I draw with rulers, but I'm telling you, it was a perfectly structured outside anyway. As an artist, I get disturbed over things that come and go. I try not to get politically involved for my own good.
I suspect that the Queens, the destruction of the Queens, may have been an important landmark in the way that the community evolves, because there was lots of objection to it. It was a huge issue.
I've had like all kinds of people very shortly after, particularly when the wrecking ball, and literally the wrecking ball came out, said, I can't believe council let that building be destroyed. And I'm like, well, where were you? We had no delegations here saying, save the Queen's Hotel. I received very few calls at home. And everyone that I talked to said, well, we just didn't, it never occurred to us that the city would allow that building to be torn down.
When the wrecking ball was about to hit the building, everybody came out of the woodwork, but it was the month before that that we needed them to come out of the woodwork.
The backlash after that was quite heady, but the building was gone.
Every individual building is for council to weigh up the heritage value against the other aspects. It'll be the decision of the 9 elected members. They've got to make that decision bearing in mind what they believe is the best interests of heritage and the community at large. But it's inevitable that the next building will come along.
You know, there is the argument that people come to a community to see these beautiful historic sites, but there isn't, to my mind, anything beautiful about a building that's in the condition that one was.
A building is not just a private asset. It is not just a commodity. It's buildings that make up the fabric of the public realm of the community. And every building, with its exterior facade in particular, but in some cases its interior as well, have very clear public value, and there is a very clear public interest in a legal sense as well as in a cultural sense in that property.
Like, it's fine to say all these things as long as it's not your money that has to do the repairs.
It is sad. It is sad. And as you know, on a personal note, I like to restore old houses. And it's unfortunate that the Queen's Hotel couldn't have been restored.
I really don't believe that we're doing a due diligence as far as really taking advantage of our ancestors' hard efforts and work, creating these buildings and putting so much of themselves into them. And we end up just with total disregard sometimes, taking these buildings away without really giving it our best effort.
The heart would say, you know, that building served a wonderful purpose in the past, and we want to maintain that type of history in our city and provide that type of architecture for people to enjoy. The head, when you looked at it, you just couldn't imagine that it would have that type of future to it.
You know, it's a big hole, and you know, it's kind of a toothless grin, and it's just an open gap. Now, there will be people who say that the Queen's Hotel was a kind of rotted tooth, if we're talking about that metaphor, and that, you know, the city looks better without it. But I keep thinking about what it would have looked like if somebody had been able to make the kind of investments to bring it back, because it was a beautiful old structure. It had been thoroughly abused and ignored for way too long.
A lot of our memories come from photographs, and you can remember an old house or this because you've got the photographs in your photograph album. So as long as the old buildings are standing around, a lot of people, it jogs their memory. And when we take that away, we lose memories, and a whole generation can lose a touchstone.
Yes, we were able to salvage stuff from the Queen's Hotel, but we don't have the Queen's Hotel. And even though we were able to save pieces and pieces were saved, it's still not the same. It's still not, you know, in its location where it was originally built with all that history right there.
And I think the Queen's was unique. The facade, absolutely unique. You know, it's one of a kind, and now it's gone forever.
People seem to be able to accept the fact that the Queen's was demolished, but they seem now to be trying to develop a set of policies that won't allow such things to happen again. We'll let the Queen's go, but we're going to try and avoid this type of thing in the future.
I think we've all learned a huge amount from it. I know I sure have. It's amazing what one vote can do and the power of one vote. And I suppose that was a really big learning for me, is one vote can change the face of a community.
They closed down the watering hole. They closed down. I said, where are we supposed to go? We packed that place now to the ceiling and the floor, and that glass shattered front door in small town Ontario. There's holes in the walls now, no doors on the stalls. It's just another hole in the wall in small town Ontario. They closed down the watering hole. They closed down. I said, how are we supposed to know? We packed that place now to the ceiling and the floor, and that glass shattered front door in small town Ontario. There's holes in the walls now, no doors on the stalls. It's just another hole in the wall in small town Ontario.